Assalamu alaikum. A very good morning to you all. I am Asad and I have an experience of around 20 years working in finance areas in Maldives. The last 15 of years was spent in very large companies, like around 3 years in Maldives Sports Limited, 10 years in Diralu, and almost more than 2 years in MACL at present. I would like to thank CA Maldives for giving me this opportunity to speak at Maldives Accountant Forum 2024. Today I am going to speak to you about xFP&A, which is the extended planning and analysis, the future of financial planning. But before going into that, I would like to ask you something. If I divide the audience in terms of the preparers of financial statement and the auditors of financial statement, also the regulators of financial statement, how many of you fall under preparers of financial statement? There's a quite number of people. So this topic would actually interest you more than the other segment, but it will be still useful for the auditors as well as regulators. The technology has enabled the collection, relationship, and the integration of data, which has actually prompted the finance planning function to move into other areas of the business. What this means is that finance is no longer able to manage only the data within the confined space. So they need to actually understand the operational needs and also get the accurate data and forecasting for budgeting and reporting purposes. So the idea is to centralize the data and consolidate within a single interface. You may think of xFP&A solutions as something similar to an advanced ERP, enterprise resource planning solution with operational capabilities. The term xFP&A was coined by Gartner in describing the advanced planning and capability needs. And he was predicting that by 2024, the finance needs for the large companies would have extended planning function for about more than 70% of the companies. I would assume that it is more than 70 at the moment, but most companies are still unable to execute or implement this in full. So what does this mean in terms of xFP&A? Moving from FP&A to an xFP&A, if you see the diagram, traditionally, we are currently only focused on the data from the various departments. So if you look into the diagram, there are activities which are seen on the xFP&A environment. So what this means is that finance needs to actually go into the details of the activities run by the other functions in order for them to plan effectively. Before going into details on the xFP&A, I would like to talk about what we are doing right now. So the term we use is that connected planning. What is connected planning? So I would like to give an example in terms of explaining how this works. Say for example, there is a collection function which we need to automate. So you implement a POS system and integrate it into the ERP system. For financial reporting purposes, all the data is posted, banks are reconciled, and auditors are giving you go ahead in terms of any issues or not. But for the planning purposes, this doesn't suffice our requirement in full, because we still need to, let's say for example, we need to generate a report forecast for the next 3 years. From the POS system, we generate a spreadsheet and forecast this and also do a consolidation manually in terms of a budgeting activity. The system actually does not give enough planning tools for it to forecast in advance. Some of the POS systems or ERP systems have the capability to forecast, but still it is not consolidated in terms of the ERP environment. So this is what is meant by the connected planning. So there are a lot of systems which connect into ERP or one single, but they don't suffice the requirement of planning in detail. So we tend to connect people with data, financial planning, and also plan for future. So The difficulties involved for large companies is because of this fragmented softwares. What does this mean? This means that the data sets are not identical in the two systems. For example, the first system has a different sets of data and ERP has a different sets of data, but whether it is posting into a summary level, we are not able to fully utilize the functions which is required for planning purposes. But for reporting or statutory purposes, this does fulfill the need. That's why we keep on moving ahead with the implementation. It actually saves us a lot of time, but we are not able to focus on the planning aspects. So then I would look into why we need an xP&A solution. So in terms of harmonization of the data within the company, xP&A is very useful because it works across the company and it is more agile and also gives us a holistic view across the company. At the moment, since all parts of the company are not within the ERP or the system in a unified manner, we don't get the holistic view. So we tend to calculate manually or in a spreadsheet in terms of what we want to generate. But in the xP&A environment, this will give us a holistic view across the company, and also this will align the business more than it is right now. So in terms of the alignment, currently the businesses tend to focus on the key essentials where they essentially align the major parts, but there will be some details which is not consistent with each other departments. Then this also actually gives us more idea in terms of the synergies which are required within the business, identify gaps, risks and opportunities for the business to explore upon. A recent IBM survey actually resulted in giving these numbers. 58% to mid to large size companies still use spreadsheets for their planning. So imagine the amount of time they spend on the planning, and 41% of these acknowledge that the spreadsheet adequately doesn't handle the data, and 50% of business planning time is spent on collecting data and fixing errors. So xP&A solutions are required or designed to finance functions to spend more of their time on productive use of their time rather than spending time on fixing errors or details on the spreadsheets. So to effectively implement a xP&A function, the first thing is to have a unified data. I think this has been explained very well by the previous person who was explaining from Microsoft. So the unified data is very key in terms of getting across the company. So this means that the data sets needs to be identical within each company for it to work. This is something very difficult but needs to work on in order for the xP&A to function. The planning function needs to be a single enterprise-wide solution. I mean, within a single platform. If it was in a different platforms, then it will create so many problems for the reporting or consolidation purposes. Even if there are certain parts which are not consolidated into a single software, the integration still require to work smoothly. This means that the data sets needs to be identical as much as possible for it to effectively plan using an xP&A tool. So the second one is financial data quality. So as you would understand, the xP&A system would give you high quality, accurate management reports than which it presently is. But I guess you guys are wondering why I have put adequate controls, audit trails, and governance processes here, which are fundamental even now. The reason why I have mentioned this here is because we are talking about an extended planning within the company. Some functions doesn't have the governance processes and policies required it to be stringently recorded, or the processes may be not very strict. For example, an HR policies may not be very strict, But if the data used by HR and the finance is not same, it will create a problem within the system. So the system needs to have a unified mechanism so that the adequate controls needs to be built and the audit trail should be there and governance process. Ultimately, all the information flows into finance function and for budgeting and planning function need to capture all this data. So that is the reason why still adequate controls, audit trails and governance processes still have a big part to play in an extended environment. So the idea is to actually have the complete confidence in the system by the users, whether the data quality needs not be questioned. These days it's very common for different departments to question the data by the other department. So this cannot work in an extended environment where you need to actually have a unified data, and also finance and the people who are using the data need to have an ability to drill back into the source if required. So this also is very essential in terms of getting the confidence required, and also sometimes for deep dive and different calculations required on that. So the third one is financial intelligence. So this is not something new. So if you see, there are 4 parts to this, and account intelligence. So what is account intelligence in terms of xP&A? This is how data is captured. So across the company, we need to understand how the data is captured, whether but bifurcations are required. This is important in terms of retrieving the data and recording the data. So if the geo structures are made, so traditionally we think that this is only finance function, so that finance decides the chart of accounts and we tend to post according to what we require. But if you are talking about an extended planning environment, the business needs to understand how the data is captured, recorded in other parts of the business for it to be connected with each other. So that is the key here. But this will still follow the traditional finance approaches, because we still have to report numbers according to IFRS, right? Then comes the time intelligence. Time intelligence means that the frequency at which the data is being recorded. So whether this will be real time, daily, weekly, monthly, or any other time which the company decides to be recorded. So the system should be capable enough, and also it should be unified within the company how this will be recorded. Then comes the financial consolidation and reporting intelligence. This means that the aggregation of data for reporting or other purposes, how does the company wants this data, whether it's a cost center wise, department wise, business strategic business unit wise, or subsidiary and parent. So likewise we need to define within the system how we want the data to be. And lastly, we have a currency option which is common in across all the ERPs as well. So large companies require multi-currency functions, especially if they are going to deal with large vendors and suppliers. But here we are talking about in terms of planning level. That is the key I want to highlight. A lot of businesses actually have these functions, but on a planning level, they are not actually using the currency options at the moment. So then we have financial signaling. So financial signaling is the idea to break in the traditional month-end reporting cycles and get in access to right-time information. So for example, let's say in an airport context, user department may come up with data that the toilets are being used more frequently by customers than it was before. This may happen in a first week of a month, and they plan additional cleaning hours and also increase the number of inventories required. So this information, if this is monitored on a weekly basis, we would be able to know the cost or estimate the cost before the month end happens. But traditionally we wait for the month end to happen, and when the costs are increased, we ask the cost center, what has happened here? Why has this cost increased? So these are some, like an example of situation where these insights are very useful for large businesses. The last one is automatic artificial intelligence. A recent survey done by a company indicates that finance still lags behind in adopting AI in terms of in their traditional work. So finance professionals tend to talk about AI a lot and go to conferences a lot, but somehow we tend to work in the same manner as we were before. So this is where actually the difficulty lies. We need to make the next step in terms of how AI or the technology can be used in our workplace. Whether does we need to ask ourselves this question: uh, Does finance really need to learn how to build machine learning and predictive models, and whether the material investments and are dedicated data science required, and what are the use cases for these in finance? So the reason why I'm saying this is we don't have a yes or no answer on this, but in an xP&A environment, these are built into the system. So based on the company's requirement, the finance function are able to actually do this much faster and easier and cheaper in the long run, because xP&A solutions are expensive and it's designed to be consolidated for large companies at the moment. But there is still benefits for smaller companies in terms of bringing into a single platform, but generally because of the cost effectiveness, it is tend to be mid to large size companies who tend to go for solutions like xP&A. Then I would like to explain xP&A in terms of the context of MACL. So this is where I work at the moment. So on the right hand side, you can see our main functions, revenue generating functions: aero, fuel, duty free, ground handling, cargo, lounges, rent and other, and air traffic control function. Below is mandatory functions which are required to run an airport. So we incur a lot of cost actually in terms to maintain this, to comply with these requirements like aviation security, custom, immigration, police, health services, and Met Office. Then we also have mandatory firefighters, safety, security officers, aeronautical ground aids, and ambulance paramedic facilities. We also have key stakeholder group, airlines, resorts, seaplane operators, and taxis within airport. In the middle, we have our corporate functions like admin, IT, HR, finance, procurement, commercial, legal, and since we run an entire island on its own, we do have municipal services as well. So water, electricity, garbage disposal, transport, maintenance, road development. Then we also have a large amount of projects going on in MSC also, like passenger terminals and other infrastructures which are common. For example, we have a requirement to recruit 500 new employees for the new passenger terminal. What an xP&A solution would help assist us in this. So it would actually give us an overview of how many employees require laptops, how many employees would require security uniforms or other uniforms or kind of essentials required for this, and whether our transport facility can handle this amount of increase in volume, whether the canteen facility can accommodate a large number of employees. So all this in a single platform to be known is a very advantageous for a company like MSU. At the moment, we do everything manually, so we don't tend to actually connect this very well. So sometimes it incurs a lot of cost in terms of getting things right. So this is one example where an xP&A could be very useful. So if I talk to you about another example, so let's say we want to bring two new airlines into Honolulu. So this will obviously generate more revenues, and this is what everyone wants. But we may not understand the consequences of this. So in an xP&A environment, we would be able to understand whether our ground handling capacity is adequate to manage these two. whether immigration counters are enough to handle this amount of volume, our belts are actually sufficient to handle all the increase in baggages, whether sufficient airline counters are there for the passengers to check in or not. So right now we tend to work very manual in these processes. So in an xP&A environment, we should be able to connect these very well so that the idea of cost, the idea of generation of revenue, how much profits we would make, all this should be very clearly identified. So you guys are wondering whether MACL is going for xP&A. We have just recently upgraded our ERP system into a cloud version. It's Oracle, by the way. And Oracle has the capacity to expand into extended planning and environment. So we have bought a module, EPM, which is part of a xP&A module of Oracle, and we are in the stages of implementing this in our airport. But it is not actually, we can't go for a full solution in airport because of the nature of our company. As you see, there are many functions which are not very common or not the best practice to be consolidated in a single company. So these functions, some of them are running independently on its own. So if you see the revenue lines, the 6, 7 items, each has a different software on its own. Each is equivalent to an ERP on its own. So currently we are focused in replacing the legacy systems and upgrading them to current modern facilities. So we are investing millions of dollars into this at the moment. So we hope to get the results within 2 to 3 years' time. So to conclude, this xP&A, the growth of xP&A actually gives a lot of opportunity to finance teams to conquer the complexities of the internal system and moving beyond connected. Like I said, it is going beyond the connected systems. And xP&A puts finance in terms of driver's seat. So I mean this because finance is required to understand the business more. So if you are not able to understand the activities of a different functions, you are not able to actually evaluate to that function, or on a planning level, you would be still relying on the data which is provided by the function. So you need to be able to understand and generate these data and scrutinize them on a planning level. So this is actually inspiring for the finance to go on a digitally ready, data-driven, performance-focused culture and across the entire organization. And this also creates a platform for us to have a new standard for the corporate reporting performance. Thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you. If you have any questions.